Hi, I'm James Gardner, host of Your History, Your Story, a podcast for anyone who loves hearing fascinating tales about remarkable people, intriguing topics, and significant historical events. Our hope is to inspire you to uncover and share your history and your story. On this episode of Your History, Your Story, we're honored to have Billy Gray as our guest. Billy began his acting career at a young age, becoming widely recognized for his portrayal of Bud Anderson on the 1950s television classic Father Knows Best. He also made a significant impact with his role as Bobby Benson in the 1951 science fiction film The Day the Earth Stood Still. Beyond acting, Billy pursued diverse interests, becoming a skilled Speedway motorcyclist, an inventor, and businessman. This April, Billy will make his inaugural appearance at the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival in Marshfield, Missouri. I'd now like to welcome Billy Gray to our show. Welcome, Billy.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I told our listeners this on many occasions. I used to watch a lot of TV as a kid, and my brother is 6.5 years older, so he was a fan of Father Knows Best, and I do know that I watched them in reruns because I think I was about 2 years old when the show ended, but thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Well, like I say, it's nice to be here. I'm 87, so it's nice to be anywhere, really.
I love that. So, Billy, what are your recollections as far as how you actually got started in show business?
Well, like I was at a play that my brother was in, and I was running up and down the aisles, and this lady said, "Take me to your mother," and I took her to my mother. It turns out that was my mother's agent. Her name was Lola Moore, and she handled a lot of kids. That was kind of one of her specialties. And she told my mother, "I think I can get this kid some work." And my mom said, "Fine." And so I started going out on interviews, and I seemed to, every interview I went on, I got. It was just kind of a weird thing. I was just a precocious little brat, really, and so I think that helped me, stand out among the other kids a little bit.
So, Billy, your mom was in show business. Tell me a little bit about her.
Yeah, her name was Beatrice Gray, and she was a petite lady. I think she was about 5'3" or 4" or something like that. And she got next to Bob Steele, who was a little guy. And the fact that she was smaller than he was actually helped her get the roles. She was actually a very good actress. I've seen her in Trigger Law and the Kid from Arizona, and she did a bunch of westerns with Hoot Gibson, Johnny McBrown, and Bob Steele. She was his leading lady in several movies.
And I noticed when I was looking at your filmography, some of your earliest work, you were in an Abbott and Costello movie with Boris Karloff. That was 1949. Do you have any recollection of that?
I do. Actually, my mom was in that movie as well. She had a bit part where she yelled fire in an auditorium or something. And we didn't work together, but we were both in the movie. And my bit was I had a feather coming up the top of my head, and I don't recall whether I had any war paint on or not, but I was playing an Indian, and I think I must have been, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 maybe. And what the bit was an arrow came and stuck in a post next to where the little one of Costello, I think, was the rotund one, yeah. And so I said, "Give me my arrow," and he tried to pull it out, and I gave him a dirty look and pulled it out myself. And that was the bit, basically. Just kind of, I looked at him crosswise and walked away. But that was it. I did a lot of bits. I did gosh, scores of bit parts. Eventually, they got to be larger parts, but it took a while.
Yeah, I noticed you worked. I mean, you worked with people like Bob Hope and Humphrey Bogart, William Holden, but I know you got a bigger part in a movie called Jim Thorpe All American with Burt Lancaster. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I played Jim Thorpe as a kid, and the storyline of my part of it was that they took me to school in a buckboard, and I wasn't into school all that much apparently, and so I ran home and I beat the buckboard home. Was kind of what the point they were trying to make. And I remember being pissed off a little bit about that because they got somebody else doing the running for me. They showed me running through fields and jumping fences and whatnot. And I could have done that, but I guess they didn't want me to get hurt or something. So they had somebody do the running for me, which kind of, I don't know, I didn't feel too good about that.
Yeah. Now, do you remember seeing Burt Lancaster at all on the set, or were your parts just separate from his?
We were never on the set together. All of his stuff was, when he was growing up, and my stuff was when he wasn't growing up. So I never met him.
Right. And we actually, our podcast, we interviewed the great grandson of Jim Thorpe, and he told the story about his great grandfather, and was so interesting. So that's a movie I'd really like to see, and I want to see you in it.
Yeah, well, I'm at the beginning.
I'll remember that. But so one of the things when my brother would babysit for me, he would let me stay up, and we would watch science fictions and scary movies and stuff like that. And there is a movie that comes to mind. I had to sort of research it a little bit, but to remember it. But it was called The Day the Earth Stood Still. It was 1951. Patricia Neal was in it, and you had a more significant role in that movie. Can you tell us what you remember about that?
Yeah, that was one of the larger roles that I got as I was getting more and more. My parts were getting bigger. That was one of the larger ones. Yeah, and Robert Wise directed it, and it's the movie that I'm most proud of being in because it really was a message movie that was entertaining at the same time, and the message is just as relevant and necessary at this day. 70 years later, it was a guy coming down. Michael Rennie was the lead actor, and he came down in a spaceship and gave the warning to the world that they better stop fooling around with nuclear weapons. And so here we are, still worried about being eliminated by the use of nuclear weapons all these years later.
Yeah,
it was quite a good movie. If you haven't seen the movie, you should go out of your way to see it. It's a really good movie. Holds up very well, and like I say, it's as important today as it was 70 years ago.
Yeah, I went online and I researched it, and I watched little clips from it, and I was reading the whole plot, and I thought, this is really deep, because you're talking about 1951, so it's only 6 years after World War II, and we had dropped the 2 bombs on Japan. And so, nuclear weapons were very scary, and a lot of the movies started to bring in that whole nuclear age. And
yeah, that was an area. Duck and cover was one of the phrases that was popular then, which meant if you saw a bright flash, you were to duck and cover your head. Get under your desk and cover your head.
Yeah, I remember. I've always talked to my kids about this, and even my grandsons at this point, is that I remember when I was in the very, very early grades, like kindergarten and first, and that was about it. Then it sort of ended, but we would have to go down to this certain area in the school and go up against the wall and put our heads down. So that was in the period like right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I do remember that. And then it sort of stopped after that. But I know the period earlier, like in the 50s and very early 60s, that you had that. So
Yep.
it's a deep movie. So I definitely want to watch the whole thing. I do remember, I believe, watching it as a little kid. I probably didn't understand anything about it at the time, but I know when I mentioned that I was going to be speaking with you to my brother, he mentioned the movie, and he was pretty excited to hear that I was speaking with you. So you worked with Patricia Neal.
Yeah, we've been together on stage after a screening of the movie a couple of times. They honor Robert Wise, or they used to years ago, and they would screen that movie as representative of his work. And we would answer questions from the stage a couple of times. I remember doing that. And she tells a funny story about when they were. There's a phrase that's kind of been popularized by the movie. Is "Klaatu Barada Niktu." Anybody that's seen the movie is aware of that phrase. And the backup, the story to it is that he's being chased by the government with machine guns and whatnot, and he tells her, if anything should happen to me, you have to go to this fellow Gort, who's a robot, and say these words, "Klaatu Barada Niktu." And he says, repeat them, it's important. And she starts to try and repeat them, and she giggles a little bit, and then every time they're rehearsing it, she breaks up in the middle of saying it. And then Michael Rennie asked her finally, "Is that the way you're going to do it?" And she said, "No, I can hold it together when we're rolling." And she was able to get through it without giggling. But the whole thing was kind of funny to her at the time. Neither one of us realized what an important movie it really was, and has been through the years. In fact, when I've talked to people about it, I get people who are fans of the movie, and one of the things I say about it is that it should be a required viewing in schools, just because it's that important a movie. And in fact, I'm wearing a hat right now that has a great big E on the front of it, and I was anticipating you would ask what the E was for, and I remember getting it from a professor at East Texas State University. He sent me this cap, and it's a really nice cap. In any event, he was a big fan of the movie and showed it in his classroom. So it's like I say, if you haven't actually seen it, you should go out of your way and see it. In fact, everybody should. It's still, like I say, it's as important today as it was 70 years ago.
Well, it's definitely on my list, and I apologize for not being able to see your hat. We kind of had to convert to phone at the last minute, but I definitely will watch this movie. But one last thing about The Day the Earth Stood Still, I was going through the cast members' names, and I came across a name that was very familiar to me, and it was Frances Bavier, or Bavier. And wasn't that Aunt Bee from the Andy Griffith Show?
Yeah, it was, as a matter of fact. I don't recall working with her, although I think we were at a dinner table. We were all at a dinner table, but that's all that I can remember about her. I've heard since that she was not all that pleasant a person to work with, is all that I remember.
Boy, that Aunt Bee, she came across as the nicest person in the world, but you never know. Huh?
Yeah, that's the juxtaposition there is what the story is. Right?
Oh, you've crushed my memories of her. Oh, wow. So now we go from that movie in 51, and then a few years pass. You're doing a lot of different stuff, but you all of a sudden are signed to do a show called Father Knows Best. How did that come about?
Oh yeah, that's years later. I think I was 15 or 16 when I started the Father Knows Best thing, and that was just another interview. We ended up doing a test in the kitchen of the Anderson home with everybody around the kitchen table, and I just got the role, and I didn't anticipate that it was going to turn into a big deal, because in fact, I think might have been one of the first television shows that I'd done, because I was mainly a movie guy, because that's all there was in those years. This show was from 54 to 60, I think.
Yep.
And so it's pretty early in the television era.
Yeah. And wasn't it originally on the radio?
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, there's an interesting story about that. It was on the radio for 4 or 5 years, and Robert Young and Eugene B. Rodney was his partner and producer, and they came up with the radio show, and its title was Father Knows Best ? Robert told me, much later on, after we were sitting around, that he fought to keep the question mark when they brought it to television. But the only people that wanted the show and had an available time slot for it was Kent Cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And Kent Cigarettes said, "We like the show. We'd like to sponsor it, but we'd like to drop the question mark. We want it to be a declarative statement. Father knows best. Mm-hmm. Period." And Bob said he fought to keep the question mark because that was his concept, sort of on the line of "to thy own self be true" kind of thing, mm-hmm. and question authority. Don't just buy into what you're told. And so he had to fold on that one because it was a deal breaker with P. Lorillard, who made Kent Cigarettes, and so that it turned his whole concept upside down, which I think is meaningful, basically.
Yeah, and just for the listeners, the younger listeners, the Father Knows Best scenario, can you sort of lay out what Father Knows Best was about?
Well, it was as if it was a movie, because Robert Young was a movie star, and he owned the show, so it was shot as if we were shooting a movie. So every episode was a small movie. And that's why it actually holds up today. It's on somewhere as we speak. There's several channels that still carry it right to this day, and that's because it was shot with real. We never settled for anything less than just perfect. If somebody garbled a word or something, we shot it again. And 10 or 12 takes was not unusual for a scene. We just did it until we got it right. And I was very lucky to be involved in a production that cared that much about what they were doing.
Yeah, and I just watched 3 episodes just very recently. So you got the dad, Robert Young, and his wife is Jane Wyatt, and they've got 3 kids. There's Ellen Donahue, who's the oldest child, and then you've got Bud Anderson. You're Bud Anderson, and then there's Lauren Chapin, who plays what's her
Kitty.
name? Kitty. Yes.
Kitty was the name in that. Yeah.
So I watched it. So first of all, I got to say that the 3 episodes that I watched, one, you're learning how to dance because
that was a very early one. That was one of the first ones.
That's what I did. I watched it, so I would watch like the really early one, then something in the middle, and then something a little bit when you were older. The one where you're learning to dance. And you do a lot of physical comedy in that show. You're very physical in your comedy. You do a lot of tripping and falling and running into doors.
Yeah, running into doors was one of my favorite things to do. Yeah. Yeah, we had there was 2 directors for that. The first couple of years was Bill Russell, and he was kind of a journeyman guy. I hesitate to call him a hack, but he wasn't all that inspiring, really. Mm-hmm. And then the last 4 years was with a guy who was a real genius, Peter Tewksbury, and he's really responsible for the show's staying power. Because he was just so good at directing. He would come to the set early on with notes and about what everybody should do in every scene. Where we should cross, what prop we should pick up, and everything. I've never seen anybody as thorough as him with such a good eye. He knew if it was happening or not. he could tell whether we could do it better, and always said, let's do another one. We can do it better, and that was a rarity in early television. People mainly wanted to just get through it, and if you didn't screw up a word real bad, they'd print it and say, on to the next. It's fight night tonight. We've got to get out of here.
Yeah. So, when you go back and you watch some of the old stuff, and you have memories when you were a lot younger and watching them and laughing, and then you wonder when you watch the old stuff whether it's going to hold up, and is it going to really be as funny as you thought it was, and is it going to be too corny or what have you. But when I watched the 3 episodes, my wife will tell you, I was laughing. I was enjoying, and I was really enjoying your character. Now the episodes that I picked focused on you because I was going to be speaking with you, but I noticed that you were often, taking things very seriously, and yet you were funny. You were serious in your role, but it was like you were that serious kid who was doing funny stuff, like with the making a bad stock investment was another one. There was like a lesson you had to learn, right?
Right. The reason it has that kind of approach was that we weren't doing a what you might call a classic sitcom. We were doing it as if these were real people, and we were real people in real situations. And like I said, we were doing little small movies, and we weren't doing it for laughs like Ozzie and Harriet and Life of Riley. Anyway, Robert Young prided himself on his acting ability. Basically, yes. He's a really good actor, and like I say, we did it straight. We did it like it was, and acknowledged that we were trying to be funny at the same time, but. I mean, you have to put some effort into making it look real and funny at the same time.
Yeah, and the lesson learned, like Robert Young, the father figure, had to let you sort of learn a little lesson, but he kind of had a safety net there for you that he wasn't going to let you, flounder, but he let you learn a lesson. But you thought you had it made. You had this investment, and then you go to collect your money back, and the guy's office, the stockbroker, his office was being unloaded by the bank.
Yeah. They wrote Bud as being very, very human. He was susceptible, or he had a lot of human qualities that people try and avoid, like being cruel for one thing, and being selfish and being an egotist, and I mean, he had all the foibles of humanity in him.
He did, but you could tell he was learning as he went. Like, he thought he was wise beyond his years, and then he would get sort of brought back to earth. And there was a one big moral lesson sort of taught in the last episode that I watched, where you wanted to make the football team, so you started dating the coach's daughter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bud was very human.
He was, but at least the 3 episodes I watched, that he was brought back down to earth, and he was trying to do the right thing in the end, and it's kind of worked out well. But what I liked about I mentioned about the physical comedy, that you were very engaged on the set. Like, I saw at one point, you're standing on your hands upside down while having a conversation with Robert Young, your father, in the show.
Oh, I forgot about that.
You did. You stood on your hands. I can't even do it for a second, let alone have a conversation.
Well, I was kind of a gymnastic kind of person. Anyway, I did one of these things that I remember seeing, what's his name? The dancer, O'Connor.
Donald O'Connor. Donald
O'Connor, yeah. He did a thing that I actually was able to accomplish. I don't know if I really did it on the show or not, but you run at a wall, and you take your first big step at the wall, and then you do a back flip, and you end up doing a flip off the wall. It's just a lot simpler than it looks to do, actually. It's kind of easy to do, really. I enjoyed doing that kind of thing anytime I could. In fact, I remember in the foyer of the entryway of the house. The stairs came down from upstairs. There was a banister, and it was a very, very steep banister, more steep than normal banisters are. And I remember sliding down it just because it was fun to do. And I think it's in one of the episodes. I think we used it at one point in time.
And when you did these, did you ever get hurt doing any of these tricks?
No, I like I say, I was kind of an agile person, just naturally. Those kind of things came very easy to me. In fact, I remember doing something as a kid early on at the Pantages Theater. It was a big movie theater in Hollywood, and really plush when movie theaters were really something. And I remember they had very plush carpeting on the stairs going down, when you go up to the balcony. And one of the fun things I do was pretend to fall and roll and just fall all the way down the stairs, and to everybody's alarm. And I just did that for kicks, that was just fun to do, because the carpeting was so plush that you almost had to try to get hurt,
I think of as Dick Van Dyke. He was really good at doing those, like falling over things.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So while you were on the show, you were working with these other different talented actors and actresses, and
everybody but Lauren was a seasoned pro.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Wyatt, she was a movie star from early on. Lost Horizons, and Robert Young, of course, he was opposite Mae West. That's how far back he went.
Wow.
And Eleanor had worked with Margaret O'Brien, so she was a pro. And like Lauren was the only person who was early on and didn't have much experience. I'd been working for 10 years at least before I got that show.
Yeah. And how was the chemistry on set between you all?
It was excellent. We didn't treat each other as a family, which I really appreciated. I mean, Robert Young never presumed to, give me fatherly advice or anything like that. My relationship with him was actor to actor, and I give him points for being that way.
Yeah. And did you stay in touch with any of them after the show was over?
Yeah, we moved. Lauren went down to Florida and has been in Florida for a long time, and Eleanor lives up in the high desert, so we don't see each other all that often. The high desert is like it's an area quite far from Los Angeles, still in the state, but not close by at all. So whenever we talk on the phone from time to time, and then we do see each other when we have these things called memorabilia shows, where you sign autographs and you get money for signing your name on a picture,
Right.
And I see Lauren at those from time to time, and Eleanor every once in a while.
Right. Now, when the show came to an end in 1960, how did that feel? Were you ready to move on from that type of a role?
Yeah, I was tired of doing Bud for a couple of years actually before that. And so it was I didn't mind at all that the show was ending.
Because you were actually a little bit older than actually your character.
I was. In fact, that's one of the reasons I got so much work. Was I was 2 or 3 years older than I looked for almost from the get-go, and that paid off because if you're older, it's easier to talk with adults for one thing. And people treated me as an adult, which I really liked. I thought being respected as a professional, from when I was 10 on, basically, was really it did my ego good. I enjoyed the respect that I got on the set.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, you'd been acting for quite a while, even though you were very young, and you also looked younger than you actually were. But to get that sort of respect from other people in the business must have been great. But
yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the things I'm proud of that is kind of self-serving, but my nickname was First Take Gray, or One Take Gray. Well, gosh, I've forgotten which it was. It was One Take Gray or First. I think it's First Take Gray because I kind of got a reputation for getting it right the first time.
Well, that saves a lot of headaches on the set, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, right on. and one of the things about Father Knows Best that was interesting was that we worked really long hours. 10 and 12-hour days were not all that unusual. And I remember having to go into the producer's office very late in the show and saying, "Hey, I'm not coming in unless I get a raise in my salary." Let me tell you a story about that.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, the way you got your salary increased was you do. I was working for $25 a day when I started as a 5-year-old. What you try and do, the next job you got, you try and get it up to 30, and then you try and next job after that, you get up to 35, and then eventually you'd start making, some real money. Well, over the years, I'd gotten my salary up to $500 a week, and that was pretty good money for a kid in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So when we signing the contract for the Father Knows Best show, we'd agreed on $500 a week. That's the salary that I'd been able to accomplish over the years. And so the day of the signing of when you're underage, when you're under 18, your contracts have to be approved by a court. So a lawyer came over to my mom and said, "Now we're going to change the shooting schedule. We're going to do 2 of them a week. So we'd like to change this contract to paying you $250 an episode, as opposed to what we had agreed upon as $500 a week. Be the same thing, basically."
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom said, "Yeah, okay," and I didn't know any better. I didn't realize what was going on, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But at any event, we tried doing 2 a week for about the first, 10 episodes or so, or fewer, basically, even. And we just couldn't do it. We couldn't hold the quality of the show and do 2 a week. It just wasn't possible. So they reverted to 1 a week, but my salary stayed at $250 an episode.
Oh no!
So yeah, they cheated me out of about $80,000 on that little maneuver.
Ooh.
So anyway, and the other part was you can't work overtime as a juvenile. If you're under 18, you can't work overtime. Well, I worked overtime all the time. I worked 10 and 12-hour days as on a regular basis. I wasn't getting paid for it because it would have been illegal. The evidence would have been Exhibit A in my check, So I wasn't getting paid for the overtime. I'm not blaming Robert Young because he left all the businesses and the script development to Rodney. Rodney, who was a really good producer, I got to give him that,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a little too sharp for about half for me, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Oh well, you did have some very good experiences there, but that wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
Oh gee. So Billy, you move on from Father Knows Best, but then you actually come back for 2 reunion movies, I think. Is that in the 70s?
Yeah, we did. As a matter of fact, it was a whole different outfit. It wasn't, Rodney wasn't involved. He was involved because he owned the show or owned half the show. But there was a different producer, a lady producer. I forget what her name is now. But they were trying to give me a not such a good deal in the salary department.
Mm-hmm.
And she threatened to say, "Well, we can go another direction, like we can use somebody else for Bud." And I said, "Well, good, go for it." And then they came around eventually, but I didn't get what I thought I ought to get out of it. But it was hard to turn it down because they made Bud into a professional speedway racer and promoter, where they wrote it into the script. And if you ever get a chance to see the first reunion show, there's great some footage that I had that they incorporated into the episode, where I'm showing it on a 16 millimeter projector, and I got the family around, and I'm doing the voiceover, the announcing for it, and it really comes off really well. I did really well in the race. I won the race. and I happened to have footage of it, and they used it. So that would have been hard to turn down, even if I wasn't getting the kind of money I thought I deserved.
Got you. Now, I want to talk about your motorcycle interest and love for racing motorcycles. I just want to conclude on some of your other work that you did after Father Knows Best. You were on shows like Medical Center. You were on Rawhide. You were on a program that was my favorite when I was a kid, and that was Combat. Now,
I did a Combat. Yeah.
Now, if you're a regular on Combat, you were okay. If you were a special guest star on Combat, you were going to get killed.
Yeah.
Did you get killed?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get killed in that episode? Do you remember?
I don't remember, actually. Yeah, I did a smattering of shows after Father Knows Best, probably half a dozen or so. And then I got busted for grass, right? I don't know, 62, I think it was, which was a couple of years after the show closed. But that was pretty much the end of my acting, because grass was not differentiated from heroin or anything at that time. And I mean, if you were smoked some grass, you were a dope fiend, basically.
Got it. Is that when
people weren't hiring dope fiend kids in those years?
They weren't clamoring for them, right?
No.
But you went into motorcycle racing. Tell us about that. That sounds very exciting, Billy.
Oh yeah. Well, I had a motorcycle. In fact, in the early years of Father Knows Best, I had a motorcycle that I raced at Saugus Drag Strip, which is a local drag strip out here. On the weekends, I'd take it out and go down a quarter mile. We got 118 was, I think, or 121, one of the two, I forget now. But and I did that on the weekends for a couple of years. And then they found out about it and they said, no, you can't do that. But they didn't mind. I had a matchless 500 single, and they didn't mind me riding to work on it, which was 10 times more dangerous than going down a quarter mile drag strip. Just kind of ironic, but at any rate. So I'd had a history of motorcycles from when I was 15 and a half. I got my first motorcycle. So I saw this type of racing. It's called Speedway, Class A Speedway, and it's different than any other kind of racing because the bikes are just made just for that. They're special built. They only turn to the left. The foot peg is very low on the right-hand side, so if you tried to turn to the right, you'd scrape the foot peg. So you can only turn to the left, basically. And they just have one gear and no brakes and a clutch. And you grab a handful at the starting gate, grab a handful of throttle, and let the clutch go, and then you do 4 laps. And there's usually 4 guys, and whoever wins the heat goes into a semi. The top 2 go into a semi. And then in the semi, the top 2 go into the main event. And that's how they're set up. And so I did that 3 and 5 nights a week for 20 odd years. So it's the most thrilling thing you can do. It's very much like acting, actually, because with no brakes, you have to throw the rear end around to slow up at the end of the straightaway. To slow up to get around the turn. So you have to commit to it. You have to just really step into it and throw the rear end around. And that's a lot like acting. If you try and do something halfway, it looks halfway, and it doesn't play well. So there's an amount of commitment to what you're going to do that's comparable to acting. As you see somebody that's acting and they're not really into it, they haven't quite given themselves to it completely. You can tell. You know the difference.
Yeah.
And same way on the racetrack. If you kind of try and sneak into the turn, it doesn't work out very well. So anyway, I did that for years, and I had the perfect race, as a matter of fact, which you couldn't make this up. There was a guy called Mike Bass. He was the Michael Jordan of Speedway. Mm-hmm. He was just better than everybody by a lot, and obviously better than everybody. And anyway, I somehow got into a main event with him and a guy called Bruce Penhall, who later became 2 times world champion. And I was on a motorcycle that wasn't mine. It was the guy who this motorcycle was built for was hurt, and so I got to ride his motorcycle. And it was a very stiff motorcycle. The guy who built it, he built it for this guy called Mike Connolly, and it's called Big Mike Connolly. He's a 6-footer, 200-pound guy. So the guy who built the motorcycle built it out of chromoly tubing, so it was very, very, very stiff because this guy was big and heavy, and it needed to be a stiff bike.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I couldn't get anywhere with this stiff bike on the pole. Usually you go around as close to the pole as you can, but I couldn't get any traction with this stiff bike because I'd turn the throttle on and it would go ziz, ziz, ziz. The rear wheel would spin and I wouldn't go anywhere. So I found out early on that I wasn't going to be successful on the pole. So I went to the outside of the racetrack, out by the wall where the dirt was deep. It was like 1.5 inches deep out there. And to my amazement, I could control a bike because it was so stiff. It didn't give me any surprises, and it was just like a ride in the park, basically. Even though the conditions were such that if I was on my own bike, I wouldn't be able to handle it at all. I'd flip the bike up in the air and I'd be down and gone. In any event, I got to this main event, and this Mike Bast guy, who was the king of the pole, he owned the pole. He could move you off the pole just by coming up so close to you that you'd move over for him, basically. Mm-hmm. He wasn't one of these guys that would bump you out of the way, which did happen, but he wasn't one of those guys. He could just do it because he was so damn good. In any event, he must have seen the way I got to the main event was by going around by the wall just as fast as I could. I grabbed a handful and went for it and made it into the main event. So what he did was, seeing that I was going to do that same thing in the main event, instead of going to the pole and staying on the pole as he normally would, was the way he did it. He did this big slide job on me and slid in front of me in the middle of the turn. And so I just turned underneath him real quick because I could control the bike, and I passed him on the way out. So we did this. He passed me, let me put it this way. I passed him 8 times in a 4-lap race.
Wow. And
he passed me 8 times in a 4-lap race. We did the same thing in every turn, but I got the last pass. So I got the perfect race under my belt, and against the best that there was on the track at the time, with Penhall and Mike Bast. I mean, there weren't 2 guys better than that in Speedway at the time, and I beat them both in a main event. So I got the pinnacle of my Speedway career with that race.
Oh, terrific. I can tell by the way you're recounting that race just how much fun that was for you then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was just, it's so noble. There's something really elegant about it because the bikes are made to go sideways. The forks usually are very much more straight up and down than they are on a normal motorcycle. You see these Harley Davidsons that they stretch the front wheel way out there, and it's yeah. Well, it's the opposite of that. These forks are almost straight up and down, and so it allows you to get sideways. Have you ever seen a sprint car race?
Yes.
Well, you approach the turn just as you would if you were in a sprint car. You throw the back end around and you back into the turn, basically. And wow. So it just couldn't be more elegant, and the feeling is it's a controlled fall, basically. and there's not. I mean, sex is close, but no cigar.
No cigar. Well, you were good at controlled falls, though. You'd been doing those.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's something I took advantage of. I was the king of falling down in my Speedway career too. I was going a lot faster than I usually could, basically, just because of the fun of it. And I fell down all the time. I just was either I did good or did fairly well, or I fell down. Basically, that was my scam. What I ended up doing is, because I learned how to fall down, because my sister took me up to the Yosemite when I was 5 years old. I learned how to ski basically,
Mm-hmm.
and every time I take off, it would end in a fall because I was just going over my head. And it's 5 year old. You're ragamuffin. It doesn't matter. So what I would end up doing after a little while of falling down every time I took off was that I try and roll out of the fall and end up in a ta-da, kind of a position of, and here's the end of the event that I'm presenting to you. And so
Wow.
I kind of incorporated that into my Speedway falls as well. I end up falling down and roll around and end up in a ta-da at the end of it. So
Wow.
it was all just more fun than you can imagine having.
Oh, yeah. So talk about ta-da. So here you are. I mean, you said you're in your 80s now, right, Billy?
Yeah, 87.
87. Now, did all those falls and all those ta-das, you're still moving around pretty well?
Well, the only thing that happened to me actually after all those falls was I separated my collarbone one time,
Hmm.
and they screwed it back in with a stainless steel screw I've still got in there, and that's the only time I really got hurt. Basically, the rest of the time I was so good at falling that I didn't I knew how to roll out of it. My falls weren't, oh my God, they were, oh what fun.
Oh, wow. I tell you, I'm going to watch more of the episodes of Father Knows Best. I'm also going to look to watch the full movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, because, again, there was a lot of special messages in there. I want to see what Aunt B's role was in that movie. And I just wanted to conclude by saying that I understand you are also, on top of the work that you did with motorcycle speedway racing, you did promoting, you did your own racing, but also you are an inventor and businessman. So you've got a bunch of stuff that you've invented, and I think
Yeah, have you seen my website?
Yep. I was going to talk about your website. It's Billy Gray.
Okay, yeah, it's billygrayofficial.com, and it shows a lot of the tools I made. I had a partner in business who was a guitar player, and he would come up with these issues that needed addressing, and I would try to come up with the answers to them. And so half a dozen of the things I invented were tools for the guitar, basically. And I did one. It came from him as well. He got hit between the eyes with a champagne cork when he was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and so he said, "Let's do something about champagne cork damage, because every year people lose eyes from being hit with a champagne cork." So I came up with this thing. You've seen it if you scroll down through my website.
I saw it.
Yeah, the champagne key, it's called. And it controls the release of the champagne cork. You're in control of it. It doesn't just go out into the air and hit somebody. And I'm waiting for the time to sell one in solid 18 karat gold, because gold is up to about, I don't know, it's about $2,000 an ounce now. And so I haven't calculated what the price of that's going to be, but one of those gold champagne keys is going to go for something in the between $100,000 and $200,000. But number one is available if you know any billionaires. You can get a finder's fee if you can find me somebody.
I'm gonna work on that one, Billy. I'll tell you, but I know I went through your website. It's billygrayofficial.com, and it's a great website because it has your things about your movies and your career, but it's also got your inventions on there. It's got some photos of your motorcycle racing, your speedway work. So it's a fantastic website that you've put together, and I encourage our listeners.
There's something else that I'm kind of proud of too on there. Robert YHYS is giving an interview, and he says that I was the best kid actor that he ever worked with, which is saying something.
Oh, for sure. And again, I'll close with this, but watching your character on Father Knows Best, you've got this very serious look on your face because you're like very serious about your life. You're not just like this goofy, like you're just Oh, whatever. You've got like a mission, it seems. The 3 episodes that
that's funny because people have told me half a dozen times I've been told, why are you so serious? Apparently, I just have this face that falls into a serious look. It's not that I'm, feeling depressed or glum or anything. It's just the way I look, I guess.
No, but it was good though. It made your character funnier, and it also made it that you were taking life seriously, but you were learning some of these hard lessons, and you had these great parents there for advice and everything like that. And I just think you played it so well, and I'm going to be watching more of it. And when I saw the shows and I saw Robert Young walk in, he's got the hat, the overcoat, and the suit and tie, and it reminded me of my dad walking in the front door at night. He worked for the telephone company, and he walked in. He had he was an accountant auditor, and he'd walk in looking like Robert Young, and that's what I remember.
Yeah. He tried to make it real, it actually, I think there was some good acting going on there.
Good acting and good messages, and it's a very feel good. And this whole experience, meeting you and speaking with you, I'm just so happy we were able to do this, Billy. And I hope we can stay in touch, because you're just an uplifting guy, and I appreciate all the work that you've done and that you continue to do.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, sure. When you want to chat, give me a call.
And next time we chat, we'll make sure we get the Zoom connected properly, and we'll be able to see each other.
Yeah, good.
But Billy, thanks again, and I hope you have a terrific day.
Okay, and say hi to your wife for me.
I will, Billy. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your History, Your Story. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram to stay connected. We'd love to hear from you, whether you have questions, comments, or a story to share. Until next time, be well and God bless.